Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Stone Zone. Today is indeed a historic day, a day that will warm the hearts of Cuban Americans and lovers of freedom everywhere. The United States has issued a federal criminal indictment against former Cuban dictator Raul Castro. That, of course, is the brother of Fidel Castro, showing that the Trump administration's pressure campaign against Cuba's communist government is very real. And, in fact, it's rapidly intensifying. The 94-year-old former president is charged in Miami with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals, specifically 4 counts of murder and 2 counts of destruction of aircraft. 5 others were also charged, including a fighter pilot tied to the 1996 shootdown of 2 small civilian planes operated by the Miami-based Brothers to the Rescue. Here we have exclusively the audio of Raul Castro ordering the shoot down of the plane.
Habían violado el espacio en las aguas de la República. Yo aclaré que eso hay que descentralizarlo si queremos que eso fuera su papel y a 5 generales se les dio las facultades. Yo decía que traten de tumbarlo arriba del territorio. Pero ellos entraban en La Habana y se iban a la ciudad. Que habló con un cuetazo de eso. Había un avión, lo que viene para abajo una bola de fuego y que va a caer arriba de la ciudad. Y bueno, túmbenos en el mar cuando se aparezca y no consulten lo que tienen la facultad. Ese día yo estaba recorrido en el ejército occidental, precisamente estaba en una unidad cerca de Managua. Y ya esa mañana ellos estuvieron metiéndose en aguas nuestras. Salió la guardia, etc. Y después sucedió lo que ustedes conocen. Ellos dicen que fue en agua internacional, nosotros que fue en agua nuestra. Ahora recientemente, la Agencia Federal de Aviación Civil Americana le quitó la licencia a basurtas de cabecilla de los llamados hermanos al rescate.
You can bet that piece of evidence will be played in a Miami courtroom. The Miami-based volunteer group made up of Cuban exiles searched the waters between Cuba and Florida for refugees fleeing communist oppression. Then on February 24th, 1996, Cuban MiG fighters, which supplied, of course, by the Russians, fired missiles at the aircraft, killing 4 men. Armando Alejandra Jr., Carlos Costa, Mario de la Pena, and Pablo Morales. Prosecutors allege that Castro authorized the attack. We just played an audio that proves that point. The announcement came today against the symbolic backdrop of Miami's Freedom Tower, where hundreds of thousands of Cuban refugees have been processed after fleeing Fidel Castro's brutal revolution. Castro stepped down as president in 2018. That's Raul Castro. Later resigned as the head of Cuba's Communist Party. But he remains a powerful figure within Cuba's politics and government. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, himself of Cuban-American descent, also delivered a message directly to the Cuban people, saying their suffering is not caused by America, but by the corrupt communist rulers who have plundered billions while leaving families without electricity, food, or fuel. Rubio, of course, is absolutely correct. The Don Roe Doctrine is leaving no harbor for communism or Marxism in the Western Hemisphere. We will see this scourge ended, and America's enduring legacy of freedom will emanate for generations to come. This story is very close to my own heart because my own wife, Nidia Bertrand de Espinosa's father, Lieutenant Colonel Joaquin Bertrand, was the military attaché in the Cuban consulate in Washington, D.C. Although he was a civil servant, when the Batista government fell and Fidel Castro came to power, he was ordered to return to Cuba for debriefings. His bags were packed and he was ready to go. The night before he left, a friendly CIA agent knocked on the door to tell my father-in-law that he should not return to Havana because he was on a list of people to be eliminated. Therefore, he lost everything, his savings, his home, his insurance, essentially all the rudimentaries of his basic life lost forever in Cuba. He also spoke little English, and therefore he employed himself as a fuller brushman. Some of my older listeners will know what that is. A house painter, a printer, and of course the deep and abiding disdain for the Castro regime is deeply embedded in all of my in-laws. So this is a day of justice. It'll be even greater when Raul Castro is ultimately convicted. It is also, I think, evocative of the situation in Venezuela. In other words, Raul Castro may believe that he is safe within the island gulag, but our incredibly capable and stealth military has demonstrated their ability to extract a criminal like Maduro, like Castro, and therefore if I were Raul Castro, I would not sleep well tonight. Meanwhile, President Trump emerged from yesterday's Republican primaries with a stronger claim than ever on the MAGA movement, as Republican voters again rewarded candidates aligned with him and punished those who had crossed him. The clearest signal came in Kentucky, where Trump-backed Navy SEAL Ed Galrain defeated longtime Congressman Thomas Massie, one of the party's most visible Trump critics. The race had become a referendum on loyalty to the president, and Massie's loss underscored that even a supposedly conservative voting record cannot save you if you don't have President Trump's backing in the crucial junctures. President Trump's influence also showed in Alabama, where my good friend Senator Tommy Tuberville, Coach Tuberville as we like to call him, a longtime Trump ally, easily won the Republican nomination for governor with more than 85% of the vote. Then in Kentucky's Senate primary, Andy Barr won decisively, while in Georgia, Trump-endorsed Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones advanced to a Republican gubernatorial runoff. The results reinforced a larger reality inside the modern Republican Party. MAGA is no longer just a faction with the GOP. It is the organizing force within the Republican Party. The Republican Party is no longer the party of Wall Street, the party of the country clubs, the party of the financial elites. We are now the party of working class Americans. Candidates are still competing for Trump's endorsement, running on his record, and framing themselves as America First conservatives because Republican primary voters continue to respond to that brand. President Trump claimed a perfect endorsement record from last night, boasting that 37 of his endorsed candidates out of 37 won yesterday. The political message is unmistakable after Tuesday night. President Trump's grip on the Republican movement is actually tighter than ever. Witness his recent endorsement of Anthony Constantino, running in the 21st District. That's the seat being vacated by Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. That has shaken that race up. New polling that I looked at showed Constantino pulling out to a long lead. So the Republican Party has changed. It is no longer the neocon Bush-dominated party of the country clubs. MAGA is firmly in the saddle heading into these midterm elections. Meanwhile, President Trump's family is getting some protection from lawfare. The Justice Department has reportedly granted President Trump, his family, and his businesses protection from ongoing tax inquiries, ending pending claims tied to audits and potential prosecutions. The provision was added as part of a broader settlement connected to Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS over the leak of his tax returns during his first term. Now, every American citizen is entitled to the confidentiality of their tax returns, unless your name is Donald Trump. Trump, two of his sons, and the Trump family business sued after a former IRS contractor disclosed private tax information regarding the Trumps, including their tax filings, to the New York Times and a outfit called ProPublica. Under the new one-page addendum signed by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, the federal government would be barred from pursuing pending tax claims against Trump, his relatives, and his affiliated businesses. Democrats particularly are accusing the Justice Department of acting in Trump's personal interests, but their analysis misses the forest for the trees. A sitting American president and his family had their confidential tax returns leaked, weaponized, and splashed across the media as part of a deliberate campaign to undermine them. After years of investigations, audits, lawsuits, and political targeting, nothing could stick despite billions of dollars of resources being spent in an effort to destroy Donald Trump and his candidacy. The administration is now moving to settle the matter and close the books. Federal agencies must never be used as political weapons like they clearly have been against President Trump, General Michael Flynn, and myself, among others. Accountability should not only be to taxpayers, but also to the bureaucrats who abuse their governmental power. Meanwhile, the FBI posted the lowest violent crime statistics in nearly 100 years. U.S. violent crime fell sharply in 2025. Remember, Donald Trump promised to be the law and order candidate, and indeed he is, with FBI nationwide data showing the largest decrease in violent crime and murders since 1937. According to the FBI's preliminary uniform crime reporting data, violent crime dropped about 9.3% nationwide. Murder and non-negligent manslaughter fell by more than 18%. Robbery dropped by 18.5%. Rape declined nearly 8%. And aggravated assault was down by more than 7%. Property crimes also moved in the right direction, falling roughly 12.4% from the previous year. This data, collected from more than 17,000 law enforcement agencies, covers about 96% of policing across the country, points to a major public safety turnaround. My good friend, FBI Director Kash Patel, said the numbers show huge decreases across the board and credited major changes at the Bureau over the last 14 months. This makes it clear that law and order is the word of the day. Compared to 2024, the country saw about 1.1 million fewer violent crimes and roughly 5.2 million fewer property crimes under President Donald Trump. Law enforcement also cleared more than 400,000 violent crimes with arrests, along with 868,000 property crimes. The drop in crime is a powerful reminder that Democrats deliberately empower criminals as a way to destabilize our society. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Well, former FBI Director James Comey is asking a federal judge to delay his criminal trial as his lawyers prepare a series of motions seeking to throw out the case. It's funny, when I was charged and asked for a delay in my trial, the judge continued to deny our motion. Also, interestingly enough, initially, Comey and I were both indicted on the exact same charge, allegedly lying to Congress. In his case, there's very little question that he was guilty. He specifically said under oath that he had never instructed any third party to take sealed information and leak it to a third party media source. but prosecutors had an email in which Comey, had very specifically directed a legal colleague, Dan Richman, to leak sealed information to the New York Times in an effort to embarrass President Trump. That case never went to trial, but before we even get there, why is it that Comey was allowed to turn himself in 10 days later without any media notification? But my home was stormed at 6 o'clock in the morning by 29 heavily armed FBI agents wearing night goggles and fully brandishing automatic assault weapons. In this case, new case, which is a very serious case, Comey was indicted by a grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina on 2 felony counts relating to an Instagram post he made last May showing the numbers 8647 arranged in shells during a beach walk. Comey would have us believe that he just happened to wander upon this. That's unlikely. Prosecutors allege the post amounted to a threat against President Donald Trump, the 47th President of the United States. Anybody who has any expertise in law enforcement, that would include James Comey, understands that the term 86 means to eliminate, to kill, to whack, to do away with. And this is a serious threat against the president. The indictment charges that Comey willingly and knowingly made a threat on the life of the president to inflict bodily harm upon the president, and then transmitted that threat through interstate and foreign commerce by putting it on the internet. Comey's post, of course, included the smart-ass comment, "Cool shell formation on my beach walk." There was an immediate outrage over the fact that 8647 is obviously a coded call to eliminate President Trump. Sooner or later, Comey will be brought to justice. It's only a matter of time. Judge Louise Flanagan, appointed by President George W. Bush, of course, had tentatively scheduled Comey's trial for July 15th, but in a filing Wednesday, Comey's legal time asked to move the trial to October as he attempts to delay the inevitable. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to the Stone Zone. Whatever you, don't go away, because we'll be right back with more of today's politics.
Amazon presents Jeff versus Taco Truck Salsa. Whether it's Verde, Roja, or the orange one. For Jeff, trying any salsa is like playing Russian roulette with a flamethrower. Luckily, Jeff saved with Amazon and stocked up on antacids, ginger tea, and milk. Habanero? More like habanero, yes. Save the everyday with Amazon.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Remember when President Joe Biden told us that it required entirely new laws in order to seal our southern border? And then his ally, Republican Senator James Lankford, put forward a piece of legislation that would have actually godfathered 2.5 million illegals into the country. They tried to call it an immigration bill. Really, it was an open borders bill. Fortunately, President Trump strongly opposed that bill, as did the Republicans in the U.S. Senate. Now, interestingly enough, illegal border crossings have dropped down to virtually none. There are fewer border crossings within 1 hour of the Trump administration than ever before, whereas Joe Biden's policy was essentially an open borders policy. Some people I respect believe that as many as 36 to 38 illegals got into the country completely unvetted. We have no idea how many of them were terrorists. They also brought with them an enormous amount of weaponry. We have no handle on that. That's not to mention the flow of illegal drugs. Meanwhile, sanctuary jurisdictions could soon see more ICE agents in their communities if they refuse to let local law enforcement cooperate with federal immigration officers. Border czar Tom Homan, a good friend of mine, says the policy is very simple. If states block cooperation inside jails, ICE will send more personnel into neighborhoods to track down criminal illegal aliens after they're released. Homan pointed specifically to New York, where disgraceful Governor Kathy Hochul, a gift from Andrew Cuomo, I might add, pointed specifically to her legislation, which pushed preventing state and local law enforcement from entering Section 287G agreements with ICE. Those agreements allow trained local officers to help identify and detain illegal immigrants under federal oversight. You see, Hochul is pandering to the AOC, radical left wing of New York's Democrat Party. The term moderate Democrat has become an oxymoron, even in New York State. Chuck Schumer knows that if he's challenged for the U.S. Senate by AOC, he's toast. That's why he, too, is moving as quickly as he possibly can to the radical left. It also explains this desire by those in power in New York State to thwart the efforts, which are completely legal, to deport dangerous illegal criminals from the United States. Tom Homan warned that ending jail cooperation makes everyone less safe. Instead of one ICE agent arresting one criminal alien in a secure jail setting, federal officials may have to send teams into the community to find that same person later. He also warned that more field operations could mean more collateral arrests of other illegal immigrants encountered during the initial enforcement actions. The Department of Homeland Security says New York has already failed to honor thousands of ICE detainer requests, resulting in the release of criminal illegal immigrants accused of assaults, robberies, weapons offenses, sex crimes, burglaries, and even homicides. Tom Homan also pushed back on proposals that would restrict federal officers from wearing masks, saying that threats against ICE personnel have skyrocketed and federal law takes priority. Homan's actions and words show a man who's serious about immigration enforcement and has the gravitas needed to effectuate President Trump's tough immigration policies. The bottom line is that sanctuary policies do not protect communities. They merely protect lawbreakers. Local police must be allowed to work with ICE, criminal aliens should be removed, and American families cannot be forced to pay the price for this anti-American scheme of the radical Democrats. Meanwhile, my good friend President Donald Trump used his commencement address at the U.S. Coastal Guard Academy on Wednesday to deliver a clear message to America's next generation of military leaders that the country is back on the right track. Speaking in New London, Connecticut, President Trump praised the graduates and highlighted his administration's record on border security, jobs, investment, public safety, and trade, while drawing a stark contrast with the Biden years. President Trump blasted the previous administration's handling of illegal immigration, saying Americans can never forget the damage that was done to the open border policies of Sleepy Joe Biden. He told the crowd his administration has removed thousands of criminal illegal aliens, including murderers, and said that border enforcement has dramatically improved, as we said earlier. Trump noted that they can come in, but they have to come in legally. Yes, we are a nation of immigrants, but my relatives, as well as the relatives of so many listening here today, came here legally. He also added that immigrants must respect and love the country they seek to join, and be allowed into America is a privilege, not an entitlement or a right. The president also touted what he called historic gains for American workers and families. President Trump said the nation is seeing record job strength, lower murders, and a major wave of new investment, claiming over $18 trillion has come into the United States in just 11 months. He stated that we have the American dream back, arguing that that dream was neglected during the previous 4 years. President Trump also defended his aggressive use of tariffs, saying they have helped put American workers and industries first. The speech was vintage Donald Trump at his unapologetic best. I read it last night, and I was moved at how consistent the president has been in the 50 years that I have known him. He fully understands that our nation's military leaders must be unabashedly patriotic, and they shouldn't be wearing skirts. Not if they're men. Nothing else will be tolerated. His America First agenda, defending our military heroes, will secure that America is the world's preeminent superpower in perpetuity. As he said to me on the phone the other night, I rebuilt our military in my first term, and now I'm using it appropriately in my second. Couldn't have said it better myself. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers are renewing calls to cut all remaining ties between the United Nations and the UNRWA, the controversial Palestinian aid agency accused for years as being compromised by Hamas. In a letter to President Trump, 25 Republican senators urged the administration to fully dismantle this organization and remove it from the UN budget, arguing that no aid organization should receive support unless it is free of terrorist ties, completely transparent, accountable, and in fact committed to peace. The push follows mounting evidence after the October 7, 2023 Hamas terror attacks against Israel. Israeli officers have accused the UNRWA employees of taking part in the massacre and assisting Hamas operations in Gaza. As a USAID Inspector General summary recently found, several of the employees of this organization were involved in holding Israeli civilian hostages or participating directly in terrorist activity on October 7th. The watchdog that reportedly submitted the names of the 21 staffers for suspension or disbarment from future American taxpayer funding, those identified allegedly include school principals, teachers, and, of course, social workers. Republicans have argued Hamas has used weapons, supplies, buildings, and facilities to hide weapons, support tunnel infrastructure, and even hold hostages. You and I are all paying for this through the United Nations. That's why it's time to put a stop to it. The president moved in February 2025 to block direct U.S. funding to this arm of the United Nations after the Biden administration spent as much as $1.5 billion for this particular program. But Republicans say American taxpayers may be indirectly funding the organization through broader UN contributions as well. Humanitarian aid should help innocent civilians, not prop up terror networks. And if the United States cannot stop funding Palestinian terrorism, well, it's time for the United States to leave the United Nations. Looking at that beautiful United Nations building right there in Manhattan, it occurs to me what a fabulous hotel that would make for the Trump organization. You're listening to the Stone Zone, and I'm Roger Stone. Thanks for joining us today. House Republicans delivered a major win for American families this week, passing a bipartisan housing bill by a commanding 396-13 vote and sending it to the Senate for final approval. The White House says President Trump supports the House version after key changes were made, giving Republican leadership a victory over Senate pressure to accept a rival bill that did not include those edits. At the heart of the measure is a conservative priority, that is, helping working Americans buy homes by increasing supply, cutting costly red tape, and limiting the ability of large institutional investors to crowd out families in the single-family housing market. House Financial Services Chairman French Hill said the bill prioritizes American families by expanding home ownership, improving affordability, and reducing regulations that drive up costs. Legislation also keeps a ban on large institutional investors buying up new single-family homes. This is a phenomenon that we saw very widespread with operations like BlackRock and others buying up virtually all of the single-family homes in the country. This has now been banned by the Trump administration. Importantly, House Republicans removed a controversial Senate provision that would have forced large investors to sell off rental homes within 7 years. Critics warned that mandate could shrink rental supply and hurt Americans who cannot yet afford to buy a home. Still, 13 conservatives opposed the bill over concerns about the temporary ban on central bank digital currencies. Privacy hawks argue that the ban should be permanent, warning that a short-term prohibition could leave the door open to federal financial surveillance after 2030. My good friend Speaker Mike Johnson called the bill a strong bipartisan package to put more families in homes, while Majority Leader Steve Scalise said Americans will welcome lower housing costs. These are the sort of Republican wins we need to keep racking up headed into the midterms, but nothing will help the housing market so much as a deeper cut in the federal interest rates. Federal interest rates are supposed to be set based on two criteria, unemployment and inflation, but under Jerome Too Late Powell, the outgoing chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, neither one was taken into consideration as interest rates were manipulated to the benefit of the Democrats. In other words, both the inflation rate and the unemployment rate were either lower than or at the same level as they were when the Fed provided a much deeper interest rate cut to try to boost the re-election prospects of Joe Biden. It's time once again for us to have an interest rate cut based on the actual economic statistics on which it is legally supposed to be based. And while we're at it, we should look into the $1.6 billion renovation of the already palatial Federal Reserve building. Why we need to spend that kind of money on a palace for bureaucrats makes no sense to me. Think how many single-family homes we could build for that money. Think of how many people we could help, how many homeless veterans we could help for that money. I favor, now that he is no longer chairman, I favor the investigation into Jerome Too Late Powell and the various lies he told to Congress about the multi-billion-dollar renovation of his already palatial headquarters be reopened and that he be held to account. We should not have two-tiered justice system. One tier will do for all. Thanks for joining us on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. Well, former Democratic Congressman Barney Frank has died at the age of 86. Frank, a longtime Massachusetts lawmaker and one of the most far-left liberals in congressional history, probably best known for the all-male call boy ring that was run out of his congressional office, passed away Tuesday night, according to his friend and former campaign manager, Jim Siegel. He had reportedly been in hospice care at his home in Maine while suffering from congestive heart failure. Barney Frank served for decades as a powerful voice on the left, became one of the most prominent advocates for gay rights in America, and was not at all shy about it. Earlier this month, appearing frail in a CNN interview, Frank surprised many by warning Democrats about drifting too far to the left. Most remembered, of course, for his central role in crafting the Dodd-Frank financial reform law after the 2008 banking crisis. It was supposedly the most sweeping Wall Street reform in a generation. In fact, it led to an era of hyper-centralization in the banking system as community banks were buried under red tape. Washington's control over the financial sector was expanded greatly, and smaller banking institutions were punished for failures driven by bad government policy. Some of those regulations were later rolled back after years of pressure from lawmakers and community banks. Frank's legacy also took an ironic turn when he later served on the board of Signature Bank, the New York-based commercial bank that collapsed in 2023 after a panic among depositors during a wave of bank failures, showing how Frank became a creature of the Washington, D.C. swamp after entering Congress claiming to be a crusader for the little guy. Barney Frank laid the groundwork for what the Democratic Party has morphed into today. He may have been remorseful about it in his final days, but the culpability, of course, remains. His legacy is not a positive one for this country, to put it mildly, but nonetheless, may he rest in peace. Meanwhile, a federal judge has limited ICE's ability, handing down a ruling that limits immigration enforcement inside 3 Manhattan immigration courts, raising fresh concerns among conservatives about judicial interference with the Trump administration's efforts to restore law and order at the border. On May 18th, U.S. District Judge P. Kevin Castell barred federal agents from making arrests at immigration courts located at 26 Federal Plaza, 201 Varick Street, and 290 Broadway, except in limited circumstances involving serious threats to public safety. The ruling, which makes very little sense, at least common sense, came after a lawsuit filed by the New York Civil Liberties Union. Who else? And other activist groups challenging ICE policies that allowed federal agents to arrest illegal immigrants appearing in immigration court. Judge Castell acknowledges the government has a strong interest in enforcing immigration laws, but he also sided with the plaintiff's argument that organizations assisting non-citizens should be able to help them pursue asylum claims and fight removal without fear of an actual courthouse arrest. Pro-illegal immigration activists celebrated the ruling, calling it a victory for non-citizens seeking to attend court safely, but the decision is in actuality yet another example of the courts trying to tie the hands of federal agents while the country continues to deal with the consequences of weak immigration policy. As usual, the far left, ACLU, is behind this measure to weaken our country. It's time for this subversive group to be stripped of their nonprofit charter and put out of commission for good, or at least operate like everyone else. I would look very seriously at their tax status at the IRS. Thank you for joining us today on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone. We're here 5 days a week talking news, history, politics, style, and sometimes food, one of my other favorite subjects. Thanks for joining us. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?